Olympia's decay is spreading as they choose to dump their drug addicts, homeless, and criminals on the city of Lacey in a nasty Christmas surprise. Thank you for watching. My name is Glen Morgan, and this is We the Governed. And for those who have not watched these videos before, just a quick trigger warning in advance. Nothing I say here about the state of Washington or anybody in it has been approved by Governor Inslee's Ministry of COVID Compliance. So this is a quick trigger warning. If you only want to hear what the government wants you to hear, you definitely want to stop watching right now. Because today we are going back to a theme that has been current, but only because it's continually in the news. The City of Olympia's decay only continues to get worse. And yes, it is a dumpster fire and it does spread just like a disease. Only it's far more damaging than COVID. Now, just to be clear, this decay in Olympia, as it continues to spread, is not going to be confined by artificial boundaries of the City of Olympia. For those of you not familiar with the geography of Washington State, City of Olympia is the state capital. That's where the heart of darkness exists outside of Seattle, where bad ideas start, flourish, and spread. And it is actually located in Thurston County, just about 30 minutes from where I live, so I like to pay attention to what's going on there. And I recently referenced in a recent video on Camp Inslee, which is the long pile of garbage that essentially stretches along Capitol Lake, right in view of the governor's mansion and the state capitol. You can really see this camp grow. We've featured it many times in previous videos, and the City of Olympia finally got around to deciding to clean it up, which was interesting because they'd done a fake cleanup a few months ago, but this was actually the real thing. That when I say cleanup, I really just mean pickup, because there was so much garbage there, and they'd been there so long with the meth labs and the garbage dumping and other toxins that have been dumped. The place isn't really totally cleaned up, but at least they've removed all the garbage. And that started a week ago when I went and took some of these photos here. And this camp had really just expanded. It was pretty ugly and nasty, a lot of garbage, abandoned cars, everything that you would expect from one of these icons on the City of Olympia's landscape. There's a number of them. This isn't the only one, but it was quite visible. So they had to bring in an excavator, as you can see here, the big excavator, because that's the only way they could haul away all this garbage. And they removed at least 100 yards of garbage, as far as my sources indicate, and also things that included things like several different cars that they had to haul out. And they also had to haul out, they had about 270 some odd propane tanks. Some of them probably donated to those who live there, and some of them probably stolen from your backyards, if you happen to live anywhere near the City of Olympia. And also they hauled away 4 semi-truckloads of metal that could be recycled. And that included a lot of bicycles. If you're missing a bike in Olympia, probably it ended up in one of these places here. They were chopping them up for recycling so that they could get some drug money. And also there were a lot of metal from pop-up tents, the framework for pop-up tents and fencing. All that stuff might have disappeared from your backyard if you lived in Olympia. It ended up here, or if it was in your house or in the back of your truck, this is probably where it ended up, one of the places. And now it's all down at the recyclers. At least they got that part right, getting it recycled. But the rest of the garbage, and there was a lot of it, was being removed, and it was really quite a mess. But there were people there. They had about 127 people, as best we could figure out, who actually mostly occupied this area, and this is where they bought their drugs, this is where they used them, this is where they tended to sleep at night, this is where they sorted out whatever they had been able to take during the day. So this was part of the landscape. And the City of Olympia told me when I went to visit the cleanup event, they said, hey, we're going to send these people, some of them, to some hotel rooms that we bought. We being the City of Olympia. They bought 30 hotel rooms, so they wouldn't tell me which hotel. But we quickly found out because it was in the La Quinta Inn, which is up in the City of Lacey. So they moved all these people, about 40 of them, up to this La Quinta Inn, and that they came out of Camp Inslee and they moved them there. Now, I will point out that the City of Lacey is located right next to the City of Olympia. City of Olympia here is represented by the puke green arrow, and City of Lacey is right next to it. You can see that they're kind of intertwined. I mean, they're really connected as cities. Below them is actually the City of Tumwater. The 3 cities are kind of together, but for the purposes of this video, we're really just talking about this Lacey Olympia conflict. And again, this is not really a friendly thing to do, to take people who were living at Camp Inslee and not keeping them in the City of Olympia, where there are plenty of hotels that they could rent rooms, but instead deciding to go and send them to your neighbor next door. This was particularly significant because there was a ton of garbage here. I mean, this was people living like this for a long time in areas like this. It was a big mess. And the city's going to decide that they're going to move them. Now, I want to point out, because I've referenced these as homeless junkie camps before, not all the homeless who live, not everybody's homeless, obviously, is a drug addict, and not all homeless are criminals. That's absolutely true. Everybody knows that it's a repeated thing that doesn't have to be repeated that often, but I'll point it out because it's a well-known fact. And I'm going to also point out the fact that most of the people who actually lived in Camp Inslee were addicts. That was pretty evident by the piles of used drug needles there and by the volume of drugs that were being sold by local drug dealers into that space and the fencing operations that were being operated so that they could afford to buy more drugs. So, if you're homeless and you're not a drug addict, why would you live here? This is a great place for homeless drug addicts, and they were living there. Now, I'm also going to point out, whether you're a drug addict or a criminal, that doesn't mean that you can't be a victim at the same time. So just because you may be doing one thing that's destroying your life, another thing that's hurting all the people around you in your community, it doesn't mean that you can't also be taken advantage of. And unfortunately, many people living in these camps do this to each other. They take advantage of each other, victimize each other. But in the big scheme of things, there was also something, I think, going on in this camp overall. And these people were being used by the political establishment who lives in Olympia. This is the city hall. And when you really look at the people who are elected here, I'm talking about all of these elected officials. They were very happy to use these drug addicts or these homeless people for their own purposes. And the reason that they finally decided, hey, after years of making a huge mess in the city of Olympia, why would they bother going through and cleaning this camp out now? It's because, number one, the political grifters who have been in power for a long time in this place, they got the census data benefit, political power and money that comes once every 10 years to 2020. That's when the census is done. So between 2019 and 2021, this work was going on. That work's done now. Those boundaries have been set. They know exactly where the congressional and legislative race district boundaries are going to be. They don't need these people around anymore to pad their population rolls. Time to get them out. Also, they got their votes, right? Or their ballots, at least. They got their ballots from these people. They did large ballot drives. I've done some videos on this in the past. And so they got their votes, and the elections are over now. Time to get them out, right? They don't need them. More importantly, they got all the grifting cash they could from this group of homeless and drug addicts. They got them all. And remember, that grant cash is really what keeps the gravy train going for the grant grifters and the bureaucracy to perpetuate themselves. So once they get as much as they think they can get out of it, now they don't need these people anymore. Time to dump them. And that is what they exactly did. They said, time to dump the problem on somebody else, and they're going to pick the chumps in Lacey because the people in Lacey actually decided they didn't want to go along with this homeless drug addict camp collection that Olympia had been piling up as policy and as a theme in the city for quite a while. City of Lacey didn't want to go along with it. It doesn't look like the city of Tumwater really liked it either. Certainly, the Thurston County didn't like it. And so Olympia felt kind of bitter at these guys for not deciding to take all of their problems. So without warning, without notice, without telling the police, without telling the elected officials, without telling the neighbors, and the funny thing is they didn't even tell the people they were moving to this La Quinta Inn, suddenly they just show up in the city of Lacey. And that's where they went. And really, when you look at this, it's kind of an interesting political fight because Olympia is entirely controlled by the woke, crazy left. I mean, this is, when you want to look at utopia from an Evergreen State College perspective, Olympia is really on the path to descent into that, whatever that utopia is going to end up being. It doesn't get any crazier or more leftist than the city of Olympia. Right next door there in Lacey, they do have some Republicans on their city council, but the majority of them right now are Democrats, including their mayor, Andy Ryder, who is treated as a second-class citizen by this kind of behavior because the people who are in the city of Olympia view themselves as the political elite in the county, and so they don't really care and think everyone else in Tumwater and Lacey and all these other little towns, they're just a bunch of rubes and hicks, and the city of Olympia can take whatever their problems are and dump it on these guys, which essentially beclowns the mayor of Lacey, who looks like an idiot because he didn't even know that all these criminals and people were dumped on him. And I'll point out that of the 44 people or so that were dumped on him with no warning, no notice, Olympia did no background checks on them, didn't see if they were sex offenders, didn't see if they were criminals, if there were warrants for their arrest. Olympia didn't bother. They just dumped him in Lacey, and then Lacey has to go through and figure out how many of these people are criminals, how many of them are sex offenders. And by the way, I will point out that all 44 or so of these people who were relocated to this La Quinta Inn, they all ultimately had criminal records. Maybe that's not a surprise if you're a drug addict or you've been bouncing around in these situations. You might run afoul of the law on a regular basis. However, a number of them, I don't really know totally the number, it could be 11, could be a higher number, could be lower, actually have warrants out for their arrest for other criminal activity they've committed in other jurisdictions, other cities, other states, and that's the quality of people that the City of Olympia decided, let's kick up to Lacey. And now the City of Lacey, it's their problem and their police department's problem. And of course, it's not just them, it's the neighbors. Basically, just a few hundred feet away from the La Quinta Inn is actually a Christian school. It's a Northwest Christian School of Lacey. And there's young kids there. And of course, there's a playground right there. Literally, this is what you would see. If you left the La Quinta Inn and you walked out of their parking lot and you looked to the right, this is what you would see. And this is what all these new drug addicts and criminals that have been moved out of Camp Inslee and dumped at this inn, this is what they see. So of course, immediately, what are they doing? They're dumping their drug needles right there, right at the Christian school grounds. The other thing is, too, not even just the Christian school, but behind it, there's actually an abbey with older nuns. And so you got a Christian school and nuns. I don't know how to make this stuff up. But of course, that's where Olympia decides that's where we want to dump the worst people that we can find out of this camp and dump them into this La Quinta Inn. Now, apparently about 8 of those people were already kicked out. It only took a couple days. They refused to live by any normal set of rules there. I don't know if that was setting fires in the building or whatever. But they got kicked out. So there's a little bit of a churn. Some other drug addicts are coming in or criminals. It's turned into a big mess. And it's right next to this Christian school. For whatever reason, and it's interesting that none of the elected officials there in the City of Olympia stuck it next to the schools where their kids might be going. So they just decided to go dump it on the City of Lacey and make it worse for them. So essentially what they're saying is that, hey, it's not our problem now, suckers, it's yours. This is what they're telling their neighboring communities. And keep in mind, there's a whole bunch more camps because the Olympia's been collecting them and holding on to them and hoarding these drug addict and homeless camps now for a while. And they're about ready to do the big purge, and their idea of purging it is dumping it on all their neighbors and making the problem spread. When I say Olympia's decay is spreading, this is what I mean. You allow it to really fester and turn into a mess with, clowns like these running the show. It's not going to get better for anybody who lives near you, and that's what's exactly going on right now. And I feel bad for people that have kids in this Christian school. This is all that separates them. You see that little road there in that picture? That's the only thing that separates those kids on the left and the La Quinta Inn new residents, if they don't burn it down pretty soon, from coming over there. And I say the arson fire because these guys have been, the arson fire that recently happened in Olympia that I featured in my previous video, they're not uncommon right now around these camps and around people who act this way and who have this attitude and who may not like getting kicked out of La Quinta Inn, decide to burn it down too. It's very dangerous. I hope the people who own that hotel have good insurance. And I hope the City of Olympia is prepared to support whatever the heck happens. But judging from their behavior, it doesn't seem like they are. And of course, they certainly don't care about kids, and they don't care about the environment, and they don't care about really anything other than whatever political cash they've been able to grift in this process. It's been an ugly mess in Olympia, and it's not getting better. It's just like Seattle, and it's a similar sort of profile where they're just kicking all these people out into the community, and it's not going to get better for anybody anywhere, and it is turning into quite a big mess. So when I talk about Olympia, Washington, and the dumpster fire that it's becoming, and now structure fires that it's becoming, it's raging on and it is spreading, and now it's spreading to the surrounding communities. And ultimately, the people that live there are going to have to start making decisions about whether they want to imitate Olympia or whether they want to stop it right now and prevent it from going any further. But that's not enough. They've got to go back and stop it at the source. You just can't stop it at the boundaries. You're going to have to go in and stop it at the source. So with that, I just want to remind everybody it's crazy out there and there's a lot of stuff that's going on. I will link to any relevant stories and articles down below if you want to learn more. Also, I encourage you to see the video that I just put up before this one that dealt with the structure fire in Olympia and some of the other cleanup issues at Camp Inslee there. But for now, if you want to learn more, go to wethegoverned.com. If you want to support us, you can go down below. There's a link that you can go to if you want to send us any financial support or subscribe to our free email newsletter. And I also encourage you to share this video with others, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. That does help us a bit in search rankings, if nothing else. And remember that you have to get involved to change things. If you don't like the way it's going, you got to get involved to make a difference. And involving yourself requires you to show up. And ultimately, the future does belong to those who show up.